Renee Friedman of the University of California at Berkeley and her colleagues are looking for clues at the site of the ancient capital of Upper Egypt.
What you got over there, Sean?
We got what appears to be a man.
Called by the Greeks Hierakonpolis, the city of the hawk, it was Egypt's first city.
Any soft material preservation?
About 35 to 50-year range.
Today, its monuments and structures are long gone. Instead, craters dug by robbers litter the site. A century ago, archaeologists thought that all that was left of the desert was a plundered cemetery not worth exploring. Little did they know that hidden in the sand was a wealth of new information. New discoveries show that by 3500 BC, Hierakonpolis was one of the most important settlements along the Nile. Over 2 miles long, it was a bustling community of farmers, administrators, craftsmen, and potters. One potter was manufacturing cookware for his neighbors. He signed his pots by pressing his thumb into the wet clay just below the rim. 5,000 years later, fragments still cover the ground near his kiln. Because of a freak industrial accident, it is possible to identify his home.
These are the remains of the potter's house. It's the oldest preserved house in all of Egypt, and we owe its fine preservation to the fact that the potter worked a little bit too close to where he lived. Fortunately for us, but unfortunately for him, one day a shift in the wind caused the fire from the kiln to travel the short distance to the house, setting it alight. The fire reddened and hardened the native silts and the mud bricks that formed the lower portion of the house, and reduced the posts and the mats of its walls to the charcoal and ash that we see here.
On the north side of town was a vast industrial complex of bakeries, Egypt's earliest known breweries, and granaries for storing wheat. But the most important structure in Hierakonpolis was uncovered in 1985 when archaeologists stumbled upon several large holes 6 feet deep, large enough to support massive wooden columns 20 feet tall.
These columns formed the facade of a massive shrine that would have dominated the entire temple complex and the town of Hierakonpolis as a whole.
This is the earliest known temple in Egypt. Nowhere was the power of the king more evident. During ritual ceremonies, the king, seated on a throne, would oversee the sacrifice of animals to the hawk god Horus, the patron of all future kings of Egypt. Designed to evoke the silhouette of a crouching animal with horns and a tail, the temple was lavishly appointed with colored mats and pillars, perhaps made from cedars imported from Lebanon. The prototype of all the great temple complexes to come, it dominated the landscape of Hierakonpolis. But for now, the city of the hawk had a rival, Buto, the capital of Lower Egypt. Situated north of modern Cairo in the Nile Delta, today all that remains of Buto is a huge amount of earth and debris, and these stones and statues which are dated 2,000 years later. But in this trench, archaeologists have uncovered the fragments of hundreds of clay pots dating back to the same period as Hierakonpolis, 3,500 BC and earlier. Dina Faltings of the German Archaeological Institute is in charge of the excavation and an expert in the study of ancient pottery. By reassembling the fragments and comparing them to pottery from Hierakonpolis, she's made a surprising discovery. Buto in early times was the home of a very different culture. The pots from Buto are less sophisticated than those from Upper Egypt.
You have here a lump of clay on the bottom, and then they put in some upright slabs, and they just squeeze this together and burnish the surface to close it. In contrast to that, we have some imports from Upper Egypt, like this pot. It's a very little elegant form. The quality is, you can hear it, it's much tighter. And well, this comes from much better technology. They had better kilns in Upper Egypt. And obviously the Lower Egyptian people who made this kind of pots realized that too, so they tried to imitate these pots. But with their Lower Egyptian technique and skill, which is not very high, so they didn't do a very good job.
Dina Faltings' work at Buto reveals that by 3200 BC, the superior culture of Upper Egypt had swept through Lower Egypt, and the two kingdoms became one. But was the transformation peaceful? Or was it bloody? The union of the two kingdoms along the Nile was a milestone in Egyptian civilization. But how it came about was a nagging question. All archaeologists had to go on was a single object found at Hierakonpolis in 1898. This exquisite ceremonial pallet made of slate dates back to around 3100 BC. It was dedicated by a king of Upper Egypt called Nama, who some believe was the legendary King Mene, Egypt's first pharaoh. On one side, Nama, wearing a bulbous crown, is about to strike down a prisoner in the presence of Horus, the hawk god of Hierakonpolis. On the other side of the pallet, Nama, wearing a crown with a curled tongue, appears in a procession moving towards two rows of decapitated prisoners. The lions, their long necks intertwined, symbolize unification. The key to understanding Nama's palette is in the crowns. In Upper Egypt, the king donned a white crown with a bulbous tip. In Lower Egypt, a red crown with a long protruding tongue. Together they form a double crown, signifying that Pharaoh had become the lord of the two lands. For the next 3,000 years after unification, the image of the king wearing a double crown would appear on statues and temples throughout Egypt to reinforce his dominion over all the land.